On the record.
All right. Calling to order this meeting of the Compliance and Amendments Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, August 18th, 2015 at 4:06 p.m. And if Victor wouldn't mind calling to order.
On the call of the roll, Member Pilpil. Pilpil present.
Still present.
Member Washburn.
Present.
Washburn present. Chair Hepner.
Present.
Hepner present. I'd just like to note for the record that Member Pilpil has been appointed to serve as a member of this committee for today by Chair Washburn. Agenda changes. I do have a notice. I did receive a phone call from Mr. Petrella stating that he was ill and would be unable to attend, and he has requested a postponement of his complaints. As the representatives are not here at this time, we can take up that issue at a later time.
Great. Thank you very much.
First on the agenda, item number 2, file number 14099, hearing on status of the order of determination, complaint filed by Patrick Manette Shaw against Dennis Herrera, Matt Dorsey, and Gabriel Zintrin, Office of the City Attorney, for violating Administrative Code Sunshine Ordinance Section 67.25A for failure to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a timely and complete manner. I believe we have several letters from both parties that were submitted.
Right. So I am reading through the letter submitted by Matt Dorsey on item number 2. And am also in receipt of the email to this body from Patrick Manette Shaw. Since neither party is present, I think that it's prudent for us to just open it up to discussion from the committee and discuss what to do with this item. I will note that the letter from Mr. Dorsey indicates that no such record exists, and that is his final statement on that. I will also note the comments from Mr. Dorsey regarding sort of clouding the issue by his involvement in the matter altogether, and I assume, well, I shouldn't make any assumptions, but I'm
wondering if you could briefly remind us of the matter.
This was the, if I remember correctly, the matter about the budgeting of the city attorney's time to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And if you remember, when we had Mr. Dorsey in here, he explained that there was no sort of, while there was a line item for the budget, there was no subdivided categories. There were no subdivided categories for how that money was to be spent, or how it was allocated across various services that we get from the city attorney.
In addition, I believe they stated that they allocate by hours and not by dollar amount.
Right.
And they provided an estimate of what those hours allocated to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force would be valued at on average per hour rate for the attorneys.
Right. And this is their quote, because our office does not budget a dollar amount to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, but only estimates the number of attorney hours expected to be spent advising the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force during an upcoming fiscal year, the information provided is the only information maintained by our office that is responsive to Mr. Manette Shaw's request. Our office does not budget a specific dollar amount to the task force for each fiscal year. And if you remember, when we had Mr. Dorsey before us, and we were sort of asking follow-up questions about how the budget process works with the city attorney's office, and how they submit a request for funding to the city attorney's office, and we were trying to sort of glean more information about that process so that we can learn more about how the city attorneys, and at the risk of turning this into sort of a deeper inquiry than it needed to go, we went down that rabbit hole to learn more about the budgeting process and how the city attorney's office requests, whether it be in attorney hours or actual dollars, money from the city for their work with the task force. And I think that that's what Mr. Dorsey is referring to when he says that, his participation clouded rather than cleared up the issues, and that he should have simply left his statement as no such record exists. Now, I don't know whether that obviates his appearance at this hearing is another question. We did find a violation at the time, I think on timeliness grounds.
No, I don't think it was timely. It's page 13, 14 of our packet. Oh, yeah, you're right. 67.25A. I'll comment when you're done. Sorry.
Right, and 67.25A is also a violation of failure to respond in a complete manner. So it's, but yeah, why Mr. Dorsey is not here is maybe worth addressing by us, by our body here, and with that I'll. And we, of course, we have the statement from Mr. Monette Shaw, which, as the complainant, I think it's less imperative that he be here, though his presence would have been helpful. And with that, I'll open it up.
Okay, this whole issue of the number of hours that the task force is allocated has been a touchy subject for years and years. And I think it was Mr. Grossman who tried to get some information about attorneys' hours. Other people, members of the public, may have as well. And it's my recollection that in the past, the city attorney's office would explain their budget process as one where they would look at what they allocated the previous year and they would give us the same amount, or during lean times, back in the middle of the last decade, they were cutting hours. Now that we have more flesh in the city, we should have more of the attorneys' times, but I think they're, on this path of, this is what we gave you last year, we'll give you the same amount this year. And I think that ideally there should be more of a paper trail or a clearly stated policy or something. But I believe that there's nothing there really that they could give us to, or Mr. Monette Shaw, and say this is an explanation of how we did this. Here's the dollar amount. They don't operate that way.
Which seems unique. I mean, given that other departments sort of have a dollar amount attached to their budget requests.
But maybe attorneys' offices don't work that way. I can make a snide comment given that I'm in the middle of something with my HOA, but I won't. About how this seems to work in my world, but I'm sort of, I understand Mr. Monette Shaw's frustration. I'm frustrated for there not being more of a paper trail, and even more frustrated that we don't have more of the city attorney's time. I don't get that right now, but I'm not sure how to move this forward, or if to move it forward, or so. Those are my thoughts on this.
Yeah, Member Popo?
So I recall this carefully from 4 months ago when I also sat on this committee, and we have the minutes from that meeting, interestingly, before us. I want to acknowledge that I think I made an error in judgment. Doesn't happen often, but I think I did. I think that we were trying to get Mr. Monette Shaw the dollars and hours that were budgeted to the extent that they existed, or to try to impute them. And in so doing, and in the way that we frame the request to the city attorney, and by continuing the item, because I'll remind you, Mr. Chair, you were willing to find compliance last time, and it was Member Washburn and I who weren't. And so that's why we ended up continuing this,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. I think that we may have overstepped a little bit. And to the extent that the documents don't exist, didn't exist, never existed, that could have ended the matter. And I think we could have chosen that route. Instead, we asked them to do another search, and either Mr. Dorsey or others in that office decided that that was, one thing too far. And so they are now, taking a more, I'm not sure hostile is the word, careful position with the task force, and suggesting that they're going to limit their participation to just whether a record exists and is public. And I think that's a bad precedent, and I'm hoping to get them away from that view and more to the, when we invite people to attend, they attend. And when we have a discussion about records and practices in the city, we have a discussion. And to the extent that we disagree, they do their thing, we do our thing, and if there are consequences, so be it. And if not, we have a fair and lively and fruitful discussion.
Yeah, and I, if I may.
Yeah, and then I'll jump back.
And I want to echo Member Pilpel's concerns there, and I think you sort of hit it on the nail of the head when mentioning that you did this sort of feeling that the city attorney has adopted a more hostile approach, or careful approach, I think was your word, careful approach to the work of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And I remember distinctly going down this path of questioning, sort of leading this path of questioning at one point. And in my mind, it was purely about learning more about the process. And there was a bit of a selfish intent there. I wanted to understand how this process works. It also pertained to the complaint, because the more that we know about the process, the more that we know about what records might exist and what records, what information might be helpful to provide to the complainant. But I remember the sort of the response that I was getting to that line of inquiry was that we were somehow being hostile to the city attorney in wanting to learn more about this process, and that is regrettable, because I think that what we do here is educational in part. When we do compliance, we're often talking about, what search strings did you use? What methodology did you use to refer this person to a different department that might have the information that they're actually requesting? So it's a give and take. We're learning from each other here in this body. We're not in the business of necessarily finding a violation if one doesn't exist, but we are certainly always in the business of trying to improve these processes. And I regret that the city attorney would, or their office, or Mr. Dorsey would interpret that as anything even remotely hostile from us.
Right. If you look at the last paragraph on his 2-page letter to us dated June 9th, he's quoting me and saying accurately, I'm sure, I just repeated what I said back then about what we really need is somebody sitting right there. And so we were using, as you said, this forum as an opportunity to learn about the process. And I think that's the spirit of what Mr. Manette Shaw was asking for too. Are there any documents that speak to this? So, but Mr. Dorsey is he's taken offense at our interest in learning more, saying that we were using the wrong form. This was compliance, and so maybe this should have gone to EOT. Maybe it can still go to EOT, and or maybe we should just lobby and make sure we get more money so we can have our city attorney sitting there.
So if I may, I think that although we were cautioning ourselves and sort of also cautioned not to conflate the complaint and compliance with the order with the interest in increasing our city attorney time and understanding that process, we did sort of do that. And we did that with some risk that, we might get what we wanted or we might not. So in this case, I think we didn't get it. I did agree at that meeting, and it is on my list to draft a letter for the task force to consider to the city attorney, asking for a better understanding of the allocation of time and dollars to the task force, and for asking that Nick or whoever is assigned attend our committee meetings and perhaps provide us some additional support beyond just analyzing complaints, which some people find more helpful than others and has been more helpful at times than others. So I think we can engage in that discussion with the city attorney by letter, and should do that. And so I said that I will draft that, and I will. But I think in terms of the status of this complaint, we've gotten several communications. We've heard it several times. Mr. Monette Shaw says that he's not going to spend any more time on this. I think the answer is that the documents he was looking for don't exist in the form that he was looking for them, and the city attorney provided not just a reasonable, but probably more than a reasonable amount of explanation around the thing. And if, frankly, if any other department and any other circumstance, a department had said, we have no records, but here, let me help you, and da-da-da, and here's what we have, and da-da-da, we would have likely said, hey, you went above and beyond, and that's great. And in this case, perhaps Mr. Dorsey is feeling like we penalized him for that. So I think that was not the intent. I think it was to try to engage in a dialogue, but I think for whatever reason, it didn't translate well or wasn't well received. And so I'm thinking, subject to public comment, that our best course is to find compliance, conclude the matter, and then continue to pursue the other issues through a different vehicle.
Right.
But if you two think that there's another or a better way, I'm open to that too. I mean, I think we've tried everything else, and I don't want to belabor this one any further. But
I can't think of anything else to do other than we need to continue the conversation. We need more city attorney's time. This body isn't the place to make that happen. So the suggestion of a letter, if you would draft it and it could go out over my name from the task force as a whole.
we'll bring it to the full task force to be sure that,
Yeah,
that we're good
right.
with it. But
Yeah.
So I'm okay with this as well. I think that it's important that we make some things very clear. First of all, finding compliance today is based on the submissions of Matt Dorsey and on the letter of Mr. Monette Shaw, and on our understanding that full disclosure has taken place, and that there are no further records to be provided. That this is in no way caving to pressure from the city attorney's office, but this is an understanding of the way that it is. And separately, I want to separate the facts of this case from our sort of desire to learn more, and that in the future we need to be mindful of, where we direct those lobbying efforts, where we direct that inquiry most effectively, and not wait for a complaint to spur that discussion, but actively pursue it, through our, other avenues that are not in the context of an adversarial complaint procedure. I think that it's imperative that we continue this conversation outside of the context of a complaint.
Sure, I agree.
And with that said, do I hear a motion to find compliance on this, and then we'll take public comment?
Do you want to make the motion?
So move.
And I'll second.
And then we'll take public comment on this motion to find compliance.
Good afternoon, task force members. Thomas Piccarello. If Mr. Shaw's not interested in pursuing it any further, neither am I. But I will say that you should not allow a respondent to respond only in writing and not appear in front of you. Because as you know, you can't ask or cross-examine a letter. That's why appearances are very important. So perhaps when you say that there is compliance based on the letters of Mr. Shaw and the respondent, you should also advise the city attorney that he was required to make appearances because a letter cannot be cross-examined. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of compliance and I can't remember what the rest of you are called. Anyway, Ray Hart's director, San Francisco Open Government. I've known Mr. Dorsey for about 6 or 7 years now, and his main idea is he's a politician. Every time Dennis Herrera goes to run for mayor or re-election as city attorney, he takes leave of absence and acts on his campaign. So he is definitely a politician. And his belief is the best defense is a good offense, and that's what I think he's doing with this letter. It's just basically, I know if I come, you're going to ask me a bunch of questions that are going to be difficult or impossible for me to answer, so I'll just make it seem like the problem is you. In other words, blame the victim. I have worked in the private sector, in the public, for the public government, for the federal government, the state government, and not-for-profits. And I have yet to be involved in a budget process where there were no documents. I mean, if nothing else, he could have made a copy of the budget itself with the page that says Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and given that to Mr. Manette Shaw. In the past, they have come here in other cases, like Mr. Begins with G.
Grossman?
Grossman, and they showed a thing that basically said, you know, here's what you had last year, and we decreased it by 10%, so this is what you have this year. So really what they're asking you to believe is the fact that they made the budget and produced no documents in doing so. They don't have a copy of a page of the budget that shows where the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is and what the amount allocated to them is. They don't have any communications with the mayor's office regarding whether or not that's acceptable or it needs to be cut or, you know, put up. I mean, I cannot, and I would challenge each of you to think of the places you've worked at and say to yourself, when have we ever done a budget where there were no numbers at all that we had, other than the simple amount? It would almost be like pulling a rabbit out of a hat and saying, let's give them $154,000. Okay, end of story. So I think this is really disingenuous, and Mr. Dorsey trying to turn this around into, oh, I shouldn't have come because you turned it into an inquisition. You were asking legitimate questions to which I feel you had a legitimate right to an answer, and his taking offense is nothing but a show, because he sent me a copy of the letter and indicated that in future he intended not to participate in these hearings. He will send a thing saying, we have no responsive documents, and end of story.
Thank you. And thank you for the public comment. I'm persuaded by this notion that Mr. Dorsey should be here, you know, and that letting him off the hook is not fair. And the only thing pushing back on that is that Mr. Manette Shaw is also not present. The letter that, you know, he submitted Mr. Dorsey submitted an email that says that the letter attached to this email explains, quote, why we declined to participate further and will not attend on August 18th, end quote. And I don't see an explanation in this letter for why they won't be attending on August 18th. I don't see an explanation for why they're not attending today. And that is upsetting. And it appears that Mr. Manette Shaw did not, or that he received that communication that they were not going to participate, and then he said that he too will not attend this hearing, this comical hearing, on August 18th.
So I think it's not the easiest thing to find, but I think it is actually sort of buried in the letter. And I'm trying to see here. One moment, please. Yeah, it's both in the August 12th letter and the June 9th letter that they were taking an incredibly narrow view that 67.21 only compels participation at a hearing to reach a determination whether a record requested is public.
And I decline to accept that reading of it, but
I think it's an incredibly narrow view. The point is, I think we're not in a great place, and I'm hoping that we get to a better place. I will certainly include in the draft letter that we would like their participation, I don't know if I'll use the word expect, but something like that, and we can discuss if I've got the right sentiment when we get that to the full task force. But I don't view that we're letting anybody off the hook. I think that just on the facts of the matter, they complied, and we could have found compliance months ago. We didn't. We continued it again, and I think we're in a position to find compliance today.
I agree, and I look forward to the way that you word that in your letter, but I do think that mentioning that in your letter is important, and pushing back on the city attorney's narrow interpretation.
Yes, absolutely. And this letter will indicate that we are requesting their participation in a process for increasing city attorney's time for the task force. Or
Anyway,
yeah.
Why don't we talk about the letter more when I draft it? But
Yeah.
yes, I'll try to capture all
But the sentiment
views.
is, hey, we're going to talk about, you said this is what we really want. Okay, we fess up, it's what we really want.
Right.
Let's talk about it.
And I'm not sure at the end of the day that there's a lot of disagreement about staffing, and we may just get Nick to attend more meetings and apply more time, so long as we do it judiciously. And, it's not like we're asking for 10 attorneys full time.
Right.
We're just asking for a little more time so we can do a slightly better job.
And it's not like the city has no money. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, so we'll get
Okay. So let's take a vote.
On that motion, Member Pilpel.
Aye.
Pilpel, aye. Member Washburn.
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes.
And that matter is concluded?
Correct. And then just the only follow-up being your letter to the city attorney's office, which we'll bring before the full task force. And
Yes.
thank you for taking that on, Member Pilpel.
Yep.
And let's aim to have that for the October. It's too
Yes, that's
soon for
fine.
the September, but October meeting.
October.
And then our goal will be is to get this in place for the next budget,
Be the crowning achievement of Chair Washburn's tenure.
among others.
Well, okay.
Item number 3, file number 15010, hearing on status of the order of determination. Complaint filed by Thomas Piccarello against San Francisco Fire Department for violating Administrative Code Section 67.21C, 67.25A, and 67.27 for failure to identify public records that were withheld, for failure to respond to a public records request in a timely manner, and for failure to justify the reason for withholding certain records. I believe yes. I thought I repeated myself for a moment.
Thank you. Just to refresh everyone's recollection on this complaint, in this matter, complainant Mr. Hartz had requested, quote, any...
Mr. Piccarello.
Mr. Pick... Did I just totally
Item
skip?
3.
Oh, I have item 3 crossed off on... Okay, I see. Excuse me. That was a rewind. Okay. In this complaint, Mr. Piccarello had requested all documents pertaining to a fire that had taken place, and I remember this matter came before us, and there was an issue as to whether Mr. Piccarello was directed to the proper authority or whether a proper search had been done at this. There's a distinction between the two bodies. The Bureau of Fire Investigation is separate from the fire department.
No, it's part of.
It's part of, in any event, there was a disagreement about the extent to which documents had been produced from a separate custodian of records. And we have some follow-up information on this complaint today, a letter from the respondent indicating that all records have been provided, and a an indication from the complainant, Mr. Piccarello, that that is indeed not the case. So it appears that we're still at a disagreement, and I think that we're charged with understanding where this is now, and if we've made any progress since this was last before us. And I think that what I would like to do is hear from the complainant first, as to Mr. Piccarello, what further efforts have been made, if any, what you believe is still outstanding, and anything that you can help us, to determine what kind of follow-up we can do here.
And then we'll hear from
And then we'll hear from the respondent. Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thomas Piccarello. In the question raised was their compliance. My response was I filed a serious and willful complaint against the fire chief. So obviously there has not been compliance with either your order of determination, and hopefully you've reviewed it, and also your order from this Compliance and Amendments Committee. This is the second time we've been here. Since my last visit at this committee, they provided a one-page schematic drawing by Investigator Kelly. Let me refresh your recollection. I had a telephone conversation with Investigator Kelly. She advised me that she had a phone conversation or two.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
With the forensic from Chubb Insurance. So that's two phone calls. And he also provided written documents, data, to support his conclusion that the fire was an act of arson, not negligence. Those documents, those phone calls, those memorandum have not been provided. Moreover, and more importantly, the schematic drawing that was given to me last month was 2 years after I made the request for all documents, and almost a year after you ordered them to provide the documents, okay? So there's been no compliance. Either the documents were improperly destroyed, or they're still withholding them. I'll say that again. Either the documents are still being withheld, or they were destroyed. That's a simple issue. Again, I had a phone conversation with Kelly. She had two phone conversations with the investigator. He provided written documentation as to his conclusions. I don't have those documents. Those are the documents I'm interested in. Remember, I was a fire victim at this site. I'm entitled to the documents. You made two orders. You made an order of determination. You should review it. And you made another order at your Compliance and Amendments Committee to the respondent. You ought to review that too. Page 60 of your packet is what you told them to provide this task force. They haven't provided that information. And again, in my response is, I'm burdening you again by filing another complaint. That's a willful violation of the fire chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piccarello. And the page, again, this is going to help us out with, I think, the respondent's testimony in just a second. Page number 60, which the complainant referred to, does request that the fire department provide the following additional records at a minimum. And that's one, communications between Officer Kelly and the Chubb Insurance Company investigator. Number two, explanation as to why a search for communications, emails, notes, etc., was not conducted as the request was for all relevant records. And three, a copy of the investigation with report in an unredacted or a limited redacted form and or detailed reason for any redactions. And seeing as the complainant in this circumstance was the victim of the fire, we thought that additional information was permitted to be turned over to the victim in this circumstance. So those were the categories, and thank you, Mr. Piccarello, for refreshing our recollection on that. At this point, I'd like to hear from the respondent and hear about it would be edifying to learn about those 3 categories of documents which we specifically requested at our last compliance and amendments hearing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Rob Bond, Fire Department Compliance Officer. I'm not sure if I'm able to answer all those questions since I was not the one who conducted the search. And I don't have access to those records. However, I did request that someone from the Bureau of Fire Prevention, investigation, actually come to this meeting. They said that they were not able to, so I did ask that they provide information to me. That way that I can speak on their behalf. So I was allowed access to Laura Kelly and fire investigator Laura Kelly, the one who investigated the fire. I explained the situation with the record search with her over the phone, and then she called me back with the investigation file in her hand. We went through every single document that was in the file. There was a news release about the fire. There were internet web page I copied from the internet from Internet Archive. There was some blog web pages from Internet Archive where there's discussion about the fire. Those are copies. The email from Victor Lim, who is the administrative aide for Eric Marr. They were inquiring about the fire, but the results of the investigation. And then another one that was directed specifically to the fire marshal, Michi Wang. Then there was a string of emails between Laura Kelly and Jeff Hazard, who's from the Chubb Insurance, that Mr. Picarilla did receive. There is a laboratory report from Armstrong Forensic Laboratory Incorporated that Mr. Picarilla did receive. There's a handwritten notes and a sketch from Laura Kelly to Jeff Hazard, who's from Chubb Insurance, and that was faxed. There was a fax. It was sent via fax. Mr. Picarilla received that. There's also a collection of business cards from the fire consultant, building inspector, legislative aide, etc. Handwritten messages of phone calls received. There was, like in a little sheet that so and so called. Please call them back. There were 2 of those. There's the PD report that would be available to Mr. Picarilla from the police department. And then there was also the communications between Mr. Picarilla and, and then the department. They had about requesting the records, and also the different redacted versions of the fire investigation report as well. So that's everything that she had highlighted. That we had. So there's probably some other things that were not provided to Mr. Picarilla, but I think that they probably thought that they really didn't pertain to the investigation per se. Okay.
So you're talking about a conversation. If I have some follow-up questions for you. Excuse me, Mr. Barr.
Sorry.
You had a conversation with Officer Kelly, in which Officer Kelly had a physical folder with these additions. You went through each document, and you just listed a set of documents that were additionally produced to Mr. Picarilla?
No. These are just ones that she was not involved in the search. She just conducted the investigation. So this is like her fire. So she's the one who created,
Right. So who conducted the search?
It would have been probably either Captain Darmanin or it would have been his administrative aide.
Have you been able to determine who it was?
It was Captain Darmanin until we did get an administrative aide.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what the substance of that search? What was that search? What took place in that search? Did I miss that?
I did not speak, and I did not get a direct answer from Captain Darmanin nor his assistant. But
you've had 4 months to do so. 4 months to have this conversation, and we had very specific follow-up questions.
Believe me, I've been sending emails to them and calling and trying to say, let me know what's going on. What did you guys do? This is what you need to, and then I haven't received anything back. So what can I do?
So you're willing to throw Captain Darmanin under the proverbial fire truck here?
Is that? No, that's not what I'm saying.
Because
I'm
really,
saying
you're
that
placing responsibility with Mr. Darmanin for not having being able to answer these questions
I'm
today.
just saying that I'm not the person who conducted the search, so I don't know. And I'm assuming that he would be, but he did not have the opportunity to tell me within those 4 months.
And Mr. Bond, are you then a knowledgeable representative qualified to speak to us about the nature of the search for records? And
I'm the best that the fire department is sending. So
that is a qualified no or a qualified yes?
Well,
I'm just confused.
I don't really understand your question.
I don't believe that we have answers to the three specific questions that we asked. And that's disconcerting to me. And from what I'm hearing from you is sort of protracted. I don't really know. I tried to get answers and I didn't get them.
No, it's really I didn't conduct the search, so therefore there's no way that I would be able to know. And that information was not relayed to me from the Bureau of Fire Investigation,
Which I did hopefully conduct a search, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Member Washburn.
Yeah, I have
Chair
a
Washburn,
question.
excuse me.
You said this was Officer Kelly's fire?
Yes.
Okay. I don't mean to be flip, but this is also Mr. Piccirillo's real fire.
Yeah.
So if I'm understanding this situation correctly, he wanted all the information. He needed everything about the fire that impacted him. And so he wasn't given all that initially. We heard this case, and there were a lot of outstanding things. And he's saying that he doesn't have quite a few of the documents, that he knows there's some information from Chubb Insurance that was given to Officer Kelly, but he doesn't have it. So I don't know. It seems pretty straightforward that there's a file, there's a particular case. Here's the victim. The victim ought to get all the information about this, and why this has to be so hard just is baffling to me. And you are the messenger here. But you know what? Somebody has got to step up and give this information to Mr. Piccirillo.
May I respond? In my conversation with Laura Kelly, then she was describing that so she asked me, it's like, should I just go ahead and should I call Mr. Piccirillo? It's like, yeah, give him a call. So she called him a couple times yesterday, and to try to see what he. What he was looking for, what he needed, like in addition. I brought her, she's like more than willing to talk to him and see what's going on. So it wasn't quite clear exactly what he thinks that it additionally exists. Is there something not in the report? Is there, because sometimes that people are calling about that. Or is there something that maybe that it's something that we don't physically have? Ms. Bergel did mention phone calls. I don't know how phone calls could be records that would be producible, but
They're not.
But there were email strings that were produced. So. But I did bring Laura Kelly's work schedule with me to give to Mr. Piccirillo so he can call and when she's available, when she's working those days, to be able to discuss directly with her, because she's the real person that he would really need to speak to.
Yes, Member Pilpel.
Okay, so I think it would be best if we not escalate, but just be direct about what's happening here. So could you address the three questions that we had from our last meeting that are on page 60? Can we spend a moment on that?
Could you ask me those questions, please? Yeah.
Can somebody provide? We asked you.
Thanks. Sorry.
Thank you, gang. We asked you to check with your people, as it were, and to provide the following records at a minimum: communications between Officer Kelly and the Chubb Insurance Company investigator.
Yes, those have been provided to Mr. Piccirillo.
All of them? As far as you know?
As far as I know,
okay.
Yes.
Let's take a moment on that. Mr. Piccirillo. Tell us again what it
Yeah,
is
no,
you're looking
absolutely
for.
not. Again, I told you the only document since we were here last was the schematic by Kelly that was 2 years old. The documents he just espoused that Kelly said she gave me, I have better things to do than come here, every other month and request documents if I've already received them. So common sense. What he just told you about all these documents in Kelly's file, I never received. I have a cell phone.
I'm gonna come
I didn't
back-
get any phone calls from Kelly. So
I'm
the
coming
short
back to all
answer
that.
is no. I haven't received any other documents since my last appearance here, other than the schematic that's 2 years old by Kelly.
Understood. Believe me, I'm not losing all that. I just want to understand, do you believe that there are further written documents between Officer Kelly and Chubb that haven't been provided to you?
Well, obviously, you're not listening to his testimony. He just gave you a series of documents that
That's
Kelly.
stuff that's in the file. That's not.
Excuse me, you're interrupting my answer. You're asking. The question was, are there other documents? He just listed other documents that Kelly has in her file: the emails to Chubb, phone conversations, a whole series of documents.
Fine.
I still haven't been provided those documents.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Bond. And you see the list there?
Yeah.
So you believe that all communications under item 1 have been provided?
Yes. Per my conversation with Laura Kelly yesterday, I do believe that everything was provided.
Okay, and then item 2, an explanation is why a search for everything was not conducted originally at the request was for all records, not just some records?
Yes, because because they're not all public records per se. Mr. Pickerel is only privy to them because he's a victim of a fire. There's special legislation that provides extra.
You said they're not all public records. I think it would be more fair to say they are all public records. They may not all be subject to disclosure.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's all right. I stand corrected. Yeah.
But was a search done initially for all records to determine what might be subject to disclosure?
I asked for them to be made. Yes.
And originally?
Oh yeah. I always will send out a routing sheet to the individuals who would be maintaining records.
Okay, so the nifty little to Jeff Hazard from Laura Kelly, 11/7/2013, that appeared recently, like June. How come that didn't get caught in the first search?
I cannot answer that.
Okay. And then item 3, the copy of the investigation, I think that's the fire investigation report in an unredacted or limited redacted manner and/or detailed reason for any redactions. Did that happen subsequent to?
Yes,
the April
and then
meeting?
in a limited redaction, yes.
Okay. So, and Mr. Piccarello, not so much?
Yeah, you just need to review your packet and
I have.
see the fire investigation report is heavily redacted, and it is still heavily redacted. And there's no reasons that you asked them to give you reasons why they were redacting the report, if you recall, in your order of determination, and then this is Compliance and Amendments Committee. That hasn't been done. Look at the fire report. They're redacting witness names. This is a concluded fire investigation that took 2 years, that happened 2 years ago. I'm entitled to a full report, no redactions. And if I'm not entitled to a full report, they have to give me an explanation as to the reason they're redacting the items they're redacting.
Fair point. Thank you. So, Mr. Bond, can you explain the reason for the redactions and why?
Yeah, I believe that would have been. It's in the letter, so I don't have that with me, but
Is it not in the packet?
let's take a look. So actually, this would have been something that would have been sent separately to Mr. Piccarello.
And not to us. Okay.
Right. Yes.
So I think where we're sort of stuck, if I'm suggesting this for others here, is it would have been great to have Mr. Darmanin back here again. Or Ms., it's a Ms., I assume, Ms. Kelly?
Yeah. Okay.
Or who's the new famous admin person working over there? Does that person have a name?
Peter. Leong?
Peter?
Yeah,
Be
Peter.
nice to meet him. If he's sort of your guy over there, one of them should have been here. And as to you calling them, good that you were calling them. As to them trying to reach Mr. Piccarello, that's great. That would have been great 4 months ago. Would have been nice 2 months ago. Not so great yesterday because it didn't have to wait until yesterday. And Mr. Piccarello ultimately shouldn't have to file a complaint to get this stuff. Unless I'm missing something, this isn't like, or shouldn't be, the most complicated case in the world. It's like there's a fire, there's a file. You acknowledge that Officer Kelly has a file. I think Mr. Piccarello was looking for somebody to just hang out at a copier for 5 minutes and copy everything in the darn file and send it to him. And
Well,
and to the extent that there's stuff that needs to be redacted, so be it. But I think the redaction would probably be very limited, and it doesn't seem like this is that complicated. There probably aren't that many records that the department has relative to a fire. Like, here's the investigation report, here's the incident report. Have at it. Have a nice day. I mean, am I missing? Am I really missing something here? I'm sorry. I'm not.
Well, I mean,
And you shouldn't have to explain. I mean, if you've had conversations, yes, you can explain that. But if someone else in your department has stuff or has an explanation, they can come here and talk to us too. You know, I don't think we want to have to escalate this to the chief or a deputy chief or something like that. It should just, you know, if you've got an admin person that's doing record stuff over at BFI, bring them. We're not going to start a fire. We're not going to hurt people. We're just having a conversation here. It would have been good.
Yeah. So as soon as I saw that that this meeting today was being held, I reached out to Captain Darmanin and to Peter, and I asked them, if they would be attending. And then I stressed, did you notice that we're on the agenda here? Make sure that you come and I hadn't Frank, I hadn't heard from him. Then I had to follow up, and then Peter, late told me or Captain Darmanin won't be able to attend. So then he said that because they're very busy and they're not able to make it. So then he said you should ask the fire marshal and see what the fire marshal says. So then I asked the fire marshal. I explained to the fire marshal.
Is that the next level up?
Yes, the next level up. I asked the fire marshal. Someone needs to a representative from the Bureau of Fire Investigation needs to be here and needs to talk on behalf of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I offered I'm willing to speak on behalf of the Bureau if you give me the information that's needed.
And what did you get?
I got a phone conversation from Laura Kelly.
And that was it. So what else, in your opinion, can we do to try to get the right people here? I mean, you've done, I think you've done generally your job on this, but you're not getting, how do we get others that know more about this? This specific thing.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm really concerned about is making sure that Mr. Piccarello gets what he needs and assurance that he needs. And I think the only way that that's really going to happen is for him to have a conversation with Laura Kelly.
Right, and we would encourage you to facilitate that. But again, how can we get other people from your department besides you to appear? I mean, we noticed the chief on this by email.
Okay.
Is there somebody else that we need to add to this? The fire marshal?
I don't know. I could only guess. I would assume.
Don't make me write a letter to the fire commissioner or the chief. I mean, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Help me here. Help us here.
If there was additional staffing at Arson, then perhaps they would be able to make it.
Isn't Peter new? Isn't that all part of this? Having an admin person? I mean, isn't part of the point of that admin person to assist with public records requests? Wasn't that?
I don't know. That I do not.
All right. If we can put a pin in that issue, because I think that it's a recurring issue at the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, how to get the right people before us who can answer the questions fully. I think we're going to address that issue shortly on a separate matter. I just, the pain on this one is that I feel like we issued this very specific order following our last compliance and amendments hearing, and I'm not satisfied that that was taken seriously or that it was pursued in a timely manner. My understanding, I mean, unless you correct me, my suspicion, my feeling is that your office and people at your office received notice of this hearing probably 5 days ago when we also received notice of this hearing.
No, more than that.
And
It's 6.
probably maybe more than 5 days, 6 or 7 days ago. And at that point, decided to do some follow-up on the very specific items that we had noticed in our last compliance and amendments minutes. And I'm
Yeah.
right. So you right, and Chair Washburn, rightfully mentions that we issued our order of determination from the last Compliance and Amendments Committee hearing on June 3rd, which is over 2 months ago, and I'm wondering what transpired in between June 3rd and now. When was follow-up action taken on this?
Okay, so it was like after that, the last hearing, and then that's when it went through, and then they went through the entire file and pulled out the email string between Laura Kelly and Jeff Hazard from the Chubb Insurance.
Just pause there. The email string, because this is something that I had a question about as well. This is not so much an email string as it looks like a handwritten note.
Oh, that's something separate.
There's a separate email stream that we haven't seen, apparently.
Yeah.
So we don't. Okay. So
Yeah.
that clears a few things up because we don't have full documentation of any addition of documents that were provided here in this packet. We have
Right.
a couple of them. I don't know why we have a couple and not all of them, but we don't have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have them with me. They were just not provided because they were provided. They're to be provided to the victim of a fire.
Right. Okay. So continue then. So after that, the email string was produced.
Yeah. First, it was the the fax, the handwritten one, and then Peter sent like, oh wait, I found another one. I thought that was the last one I had sent to Mr. Piccarello, and then it's kind of like, okay, now there's one more. They attached, to it was the forensic report, and then also the email string together, and it didn't hear anything. We kind of figured it was a done deal. So I was surprised that this was continuing.
And then, so the forensic report, is that what was provided with limited redaction?
Oh, no, that was no redaction whatsoever.
No redaction in the forensic report whatsoever?
No.
But Mr. Piccarello is making a face as if that is not true. But
Oh, okay.
Mr. Piccarello, is that the
We haven't
case?
seen this report.
We have not seen this report, right?
What forensic report? There is no forensic report.
Was there not an additional report provided to you without
No.
redaction?
No, there was a schematic drawing by Kelly 2 years ago.
Well,
that was
that's
the only
that's
additional
what we-
document.
Mr.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's what we haven't. We've seen that, and that's in our packet. But apparently, additional items were provided to you directly that
No.
are not in our packet.
No, and I told you that wasn't true.
Okay,
and
so no-
you're relying on hearsay from Mr. B.
Well, no, I'm not relying on anything except trying to get to the bottom. I'm trying to ascertain, a modicum
But you're
of
relying
truth
on
here.
hearsay from him telling you that Kelly gave me the documents.
Well,
That's hearsay.
maybe I should ask Mr. Bond how he sent them to you. And maybe there was just a rift in the mail.
And if he did send me documents, why didn't he send them to the task force as well?
Because they weren't subject to public
So,
disclosure.
Mr. Bond, the additional documents, including the email string between Officer Kelly and the gentleman at Chubb Insurance, how were those additional, and the forensic report unredacted, how were those documents provided to Mr. Piccarello?
They were provided attachments to email and to Mr. Piccarello. And then
At what email address? Do you have that on hand by
it
chance?
begins with T. Piccarillo, I guess is what it is. I know. So then I did. I took a look at the packet. I just wanted to ensure I was communicating with Victor, making sure that all those records were actually in there, and there were some additional records that I saw that were missing that he did actually add to their part. So let's see.
I have a question when you have a moment.
Not sure how this is ordered.
Okay, well, right now I'm concerned that you attempted to provide additional documents to the complainant and the complainant did not receive them, and maybe this is all just a matter of a missed email, and that would be awfully simple if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Mr. Chair, can
Yeah, Member Pilpo.
I don't think we're going to be able to put this one to bed today. I think we're going to end up continuing this, unless I'm totally confused.
Because
there's new information, and I think they need to get together. I'm trying to think if there's a way, maybe we need to send a communication to certain appropriate people at the fire department. I think there needs to be a sit-down meeting between Mr. Bond, Mr. Piccarello, and Officer Kelly, and either this Peter or Captain Darmanin, or maybe all of them, and they should go through the file, figure out what Mr. Piccarello has, and if there's stuff that he doesn't have that's in the file, they should just say, hold on, I'll go to a copier, and let me get it for you. And then hopefully he'll have all the things that he wants, and he'll be happy, and we'll be done. But I think we need to somehow facilitate that, because all of this back and forth, things that we haven't seen, things that we don't really need to see.
Right.
I don't need to see it. I just want to know that he gets the stuff.
I would still like to find an answer to the question of whether you sent this email to Mr. Piccarello, and whether it's possible that Mr. Piccarello never got the email.
Okay.
Just whether that attempt to provide additional information to Mr. Piccarello was just unsuccessful. An answer to that question would be good.
Okay, yeah, all right. So, I mean, I know I can send the documents to you guys, and I hope that they're kind of read. So maybe I should kind of go back in history and actually go over some of the emails, it's just to kind of show documents what we did. So let's see, from the task force to Hayes White, et cetera, on June 3rd. This is where you actually send out the 3 points. This is what
right.
This is the result from last time.
Correct.
And then I send an email on the 15th of June to Captain Darmanin and Peter, who's at Fire Requests. And I want to make sure that you saw this, and we're working with Piccarello, fire victim, to provide him with any of the investigation materials listed below in which he, as a fire victim, would be entitled to. Please keep me posted on any activity if and when this has been fully resolved. And then I receive from Peter, it says, hello, Rob. A modified, limited, redacted copy of the investigation report was provided directly to Mr. Piccarello on 4/13. Via email. A search for relevant communications was conducted. Upon further review, we have discovered Jeff Hazard worked for Chubb Insurance at the time. A communication record between Investigator Kelly and Jeff Hazard is attached. Thank you. And then, Peter, so was this approved to be sent?
Right. So this email from Fire Requests on June 15th, a communication record between Investigator Kelly and Jeff Hazard is attached. Was that the handwritten note and drawing, or was that something else?
Yes, this is initially the handwritten note.
Okay, and then the right above that, a modified, limited, redacted copy of the investigation report was provided directly to Mr. Piccarello on 4/13/2015.
Yeah.
That predates our order where we requested that a more
you
limited.
Weren't copied on that?
Sorry,
you didn't get a copy of that 413 email?
That email, no, I don't. Yeah.
It would have been good, and you might want to ask them when there's a public records thing that you're involved in to copy you on it. Because if you had that, right, then you would say, yes, of course, Mr. Piccarello got that on April. I got a copy of the email.
Well, sure. Yeah, but Peter had just started at that time.
Okay, but I'm encouraging you to get with the appropriate people, be sure that he's with the program, and that he needs to be a mini version of you out there.
So I'm beginning to agree with Member Pilpel that we're probably not going to resolve this today. And I'm going back here to these 3 points, and I'm just having trouble. I don't have answers to these three very specific items, and if I don't have answers, I'm pretty confident Mr. Piccarello never got answers, because the only this communication to him on June 15th says, please see attached. It is the only related correspondence discovered during the fire incident in question, but it is by no means it does not address these three specific points at all. And frankly, I'm less interested in what I know than Mr. Piccarello finding the information that he needs. And what he needs is these three things. This is what we determined at the last compliance and amendments hearing. So he needs answers to these three items, and I don't feel confident that he's received an explanation of the search for communications. It's just not in our.
All right. So I think, like, if I can continue with the email communication between me and the arson task force, or with Peter, as far as like what they searched, because that's part of explaining what was done, right? So I'm saying, Peter, so was this approved to be sent to Mr. Piccarello? If so, was it sent when? Were there any other related correspondences, et cetera, that could be released to him? Were there any relevant email correspondences from Laura Kelly? And then, because I tried to call, but there was no answer.
Right.
And then he responds, yes, you may release the correspondence to Mr. Piccarello. It was not released before. As we recently discovered, Jeff Hazard worked for Chubb Insurance, so that they didn't have that connection there. There are no other related correspondences, emails or otherwise. And then on the 15th, Mr. Piccarello, please see attached. This is the only related correspondence, et cetera. Okay, now then there's another following correspondence too that I had sent to Victor, and I'm going to see if we can find where that is in this packet. So is it, Victor, can you help me out here? It says the stuff that I had noticed that there was something that was missed.
So, I mean, yeah.
But okay, whether or not this item between Officer Kelly and Jeff Hazard was disclosed, it should have been discovered or known beforehand. I mean, if this file, I mean, I'm imagining that there's a paper file somewhere, and I would assume that everything related to the fire incident or investigation is in that file. And if there's something else that's like filed somewhere else.
Right, but this is apparently the file that you were talking to Officer Kelly on the phone yesterday, and she had the file in her hand as you guys were going through it, and determined that everything in that file had been produced to Mr. Piccarello, or not everything was disclosable, or...
I would say that, no, not everything was disclosed to Mr. Piccarello. What was not released was a press release about the fire, were copies from the internet page from Internet Archive and also from their blog, emails from Victor Lim at for Supervisor Marr.
Right.
There's a couple of those.
So,
a collection of business cards, handwritten phone messages that so and so called you, and then the PD report.
Okay, and these were not produced because you determined that they were not relevant to what Mr. Piccarello was seeking, or?
I did not make that determination. They were. I can only assume that they maybe try to streamline things, and not thinking that that's really what Mr. Piccarello wanted. That he wanted stuff that's specifically about the investigation.
That's not the way.
Yeah, there's an education perhaps that needs to occur with individuals that are conducting searches.
Right, and that's why it's helpful for us to speak with the custodian of records in order to ask these questions. What search string did you use when you conducted that email search, and what results did that produce? That's why we have that. That's why we have that person in front of us.
Yeah, I would like for someone from there to be here too.
Then we're
So how can we make that happen? Who do we need to communicate above you to get the right people here? And is there some magic word or special code or something that we need to put in a message to encourage a meeting, if that's what it'll take, and I think it will, between you and Mr. Piccarello and our three favorite people from BFI?
All right.
How do we make it happen? How?
I could suggest the fire marshal.
Okay.
This is a new fire marshal, DeCosio.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, DeCossio.
Okay. This Michi
Dan.
Wong?
Oh, Michi. Yeah, she is no longer the fire marshal.
She's elsewhere in the department?
Separated.
Left the department.
Yeah.
Okay. So does Fire Marshal DeCosio have a first name?
Dan.
Great. Okay, so are we best to communicate with him and copy to the chief and encourage that such a meeting happen and that you guys try to work it out? I mean, if you sit down and go through the file and Mr. Piccarello says, I'd like a copy of that. That looks very interesting. That's helpful to me. Can you or somebody go to a copier and just make a copy and make him happier? Can you just make him happier, please?
I can try to help facilitate that.
Okay.
I can't say that.
You can't guarantee that he'll be happy, but you'll try to facilitate this sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
especially, yeah.
my thinking is that we need to complete this matter. I'm not satisfied finding compliance because it sounds like there is some tangible follow-up that is still left to be done, and we have not, been given answers to know that an adequate, effort was made to produce additional documents and explanation as well. I mean, this is, one of the things that we had requested provided to Mr. Piccarello was an explanation as to why a search for communications was not conducted, and we wanted that explanation as well, originally. And
Yeah. So the question is, why at the very start, when this request was first made, was the entire file not copied and handed over to the requester? Is that what you're?
That's part of it.
Not
yeah.
just the file, that's
It's
also emails.
email searches, notes regarding
Right.
it that
Any
might not be in the
pertinent
file.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody
Yeah.
and everybody.
Yeah. So I just know that if you would probably need to speak to someone from that bureau, because I know that there's a lot of legal issues involved. There's a lot of other. I think Captain Darman did explain this last time that he was here about the nature of their work. They're peace officers, so that. And
Which is
yeah,
fine,
I know
but
that
then they just need to say we're withholding this and why. And then if Mr. Piccarello has an issue with the withholding, he can come here or he has other avenues of recourse.
Yeah.
But for this thing to just appear in June.
Okay, yeah.
And,
Okay. So
Can I ask a question to Mr. Piccarello? If we can help facilitate such a meeting, would that help you? Do you want to go to a meeting with these guys or not?
Yeah, I'd certainly go to a meeting. Obviously, I want the documents. But
right.
that's not the issue. The issue is you have an order of determination that hasn't been complied with in 9 months. You have an order from this Compliance and Amendments Committee that still hasn't been complied with. So it goes beyond me having a meeting with them. I mean, it's naive for you to think that I'm going to get the documents in an informal meeting in their office. Naive on your part. What you need to do is you need to enforce your order of determination, and you need to enforce your order by the Compliance and Amendments Committee. Now, whether that means bringing in the fire chief or Captain Darman, that's up to you. But having an informal meeting, you're being naive. I won't get the documents at this informal meeting. You need to enforce your order of determination, and you need to enforce your order from this Compliance and Amendments Committee 2 months ago.
All right, I'm just trying to get you this.
So the means of enforcing our order of determination, if we are to do that, is to continue the matter and drag these folks before us again in order to make sure that compliance occurs. We have another option, or maybe.
No, I'm thinking this should go to the full task force for that. I mean, I don't want to have it brought back here, and then if there's still a problem, then we would be sending it to the full task force. It's been here twice. I think it should go to the full task force. And but in the meantime, Mr. Piccarello should meet with people who can get him all of the information.
Right, and if that means a meeting with Officer Kelly, a phone call with Officer Kelly, and so that Officer Kelly can explain, certain aspects of this order of determination to him, that might be helpful. I agree, and I think that it should go to the full task force as well. With the auspice that we may find additional violations at the full task force. And that's not a threat. I generally hope that if this goes before the full task force again, it will be a very, very, very simple, short agenda item. We can find that additional compliance has been made and, do away with the item fairly simply. But I do think that the mere fact that there are items in the folder in the file that have not been provided to Mr. Piccarello is baffling to me. I mean, and if the reason is because we didn't think that he wanted those, we were trying to give him stuff that we thought he wanted. I think that's a misunderstanding of the way public records requests work, wherein in fact the person requesting the records, it's their not obligation, it's their right to determine what is important and relevant to them, not the person, fielding the request for records. So, I think that the full file needs to be provided to Mr. Piccarello, and this probably needs to, additional correspondence needs to take place between Officer Kelly and Mr. Piccarello.
And not just the file, everything pertaining to Mr. Piccarello's fire. He's the victim, so he wants to know everything that's there. And that's the simplest way to comply with this. Give him absolutely everything. And more is better than less.
So,
and unredacted is better than redacted, because he's the victim.
And if redacted, explain why.
Right.
All of that.
Yeah, anything withheld has to be justified, or that's a violation of the ordinance.
So I was inclined to continue it in committee, but now I'm persuaded, subject to public comment, that we should refer this back to the full task force, I would say without any recommendation, so the task force has the opportunity to do things with it, either send it somewhere or do something. Mm-hmm. And if we send this back to the full task force for the October meeting and send a communication in the next few days to the fire department explaining more so what we're looking for, that they would have an opportunity in the next month to have a meeting, do more search, provide an explanation, whatever it is they need to do, so that further bad things might not happen to them at the October meeting.
Right,
but it gives them a more powerful incentive.
Right. I think that's
Is that
yeah.
where we're headed?
Is that a motion?
Does that work conceptually? I mean, I can flesh that out if that's helpful.
No, and I think that, we're moving on two tracks here. We're moving to find compliance for our purposes, and we're moving more quickly, I hope, to get
Actually,
Mr.
no.
I don't think we're moving to find.
No. We're moving to, not to find compliance here. We're moving to ultimately have compliance by October 7th.
Right, and to the letter to the respondent in this matter should indicate should reiterate the 3 points from the last order of determination, and probably reiterate the original request from Mr. Piccarello, and be very clear that who we really need to talk to, who we really need before us as an authorized, knowledgeable representative to address this matter is the person who conducted the search. The person who actually conducted the search for responsive records, whether that's one person or two people. I don't know.
And yeah,
but this is distressing at this point that we have not been able to find answers to simple questions. And I honestly, Mr. Bond, I'm sorry that you've been brought before so many times, and to the extent that you made efforts to have the proper people before us, I'm sorry that has not occurred, because I don't think that you're personally at fault here, and we should be clear about that.
Wants to speak, Mr.
Bond wants to speak? Mr. Bond, sorry, I can't see you. I don't know.
I don't know, back there. I just have some other questions about, if you're going to be reintroducing the 3 points. As far as explanation, exactly what you expect to see in explanation. Because I still am not exactly clear what it is that you're looking for.
Right, and at this point, I think it's an explanation of the nature of the search that took place, and how, that search should track the original request made by Mr. Pilpel. So I think what we need is an explanation of the actual process, the search that took place for records. That's what I think would be most productive.
Like an example would be, I looked in the emails, and then I did this type of search. I went to this file. I looked over here. I asked so-and-so if they knew of any other location where records might be.
It's just so much. Yes. It's so much easier for us to make a determination confidently with that type of specificity. I searched the email for emails between Officer Kelly and Chubb Insurance, or this representative at Chubb Insurance, and it produced this record.
Okay.
It produced no records. It produced 150 records,
Okay.
and we determined that 4 of them could not be disclosed.
Yeah.
At this point, that's kind of,
all right. All right. So thank you. That's helpful, because I would need to. The only person who could be doing that is the person who actually conducted the search.
Right. And that just gives us the information to understand whether an adequate effort has been made to comply with the public records request, whether Mr. Piccarello has in fact received all the.
Okay, and just one more clarification regarding justification for redactions. The citing Public Record Act legislation, is that not enough? Because we've already done that.
I think it may be enough, but it depends on the specifics. So I wouldn't just say we've redacted all names because of 6254F. I think you need to say for these things, on the incident report, this was redacted because of blah, this other thing. You may have different bases, and you may need to explain that to Mr. Piccarello. So I think in a letter to the fire department, and we'll name names at the appropriate time, we should attach the June 3rd memo. Mm-hmm. Right, because I think that was pretty clear. And I think we can attach Mr. Piccarello's original request from January 21. And I'm going back in the packet and seeing, like on page 162, for example, as soon as you got the request, Mr. Bond, you responded and you sent something to Mr. Piccarello, said, please call to discuss. You sent something out the next day to Mr. Darmanin, you were right on it. So that's all to the good. I think that the problems here are elsewhere in the department, and I think we're trying to find the right route of communication to the fire marshal, the head of BFI, whoever else.
And you said it would be great if we had somebody from the Bureau here to explain what happened, right? Okay, so...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good education.
Right.
And if we need to suck up Peter's time, then so be it.
Yeah.
We want to do this. We want to do this right, not just for Mr. Piccarello, but for anyone now and in the future. Unfortunately, it's probably not the only fire that's going to happen in town.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So if I can go back to fleshing out my motion, it's to refer this back to the full task force for the October meeting, and to send a letter to the fire department, including both forwarding the June 3rd letter and Mr. Piccarello's original request from January 21.
Right, and I would only modify the June 3rd letter to say an explanation of what type of search took place.
Yes, as to why and what steps were taken to search,
Right, because the why, I care less about why didn't you search for it? What I really want to know is what type of search did you do?
And it's a good instructive lesson for all of us. And that we would encourage, and this is the thing we need to get in the communication, that we would encourage them to have a meeting if they deem it productive with Mr. Piccarello and all of these various people to go over what he was asking for, what exists, and to get it to him. We may find that a month from now everyone's happier, and we don't, and it'll be a really short discussion.
I would very, very much like that if it was a short agenda.
But I'm naive in thinking that.
And just another tip is that communication with Mr. Piccarello is probably the premium concern as well.
Yeah.
That really satisfying Mr. Piccarello here will make this one. We can tidy this up. I still but unfortunately not today. I don't think so.
So I think that is sort of my motion.
May I ask who will be drafting this and sending this letter?
You want to do a first pass and we'll review it, and ultimately it'll go from Victor? I don't know that this is a letter, it may just be an email, but I think we need to formally communicate.
Yes, I think so. And then, as long as the point, I think it's fairly straightforward. It's the original request, the June 3rd letter from the Compliance and Amendments Committee with that one minor modification on number 2, and then a request, that Mr. Bond had advised that it would be helpful for somebody from the Bureau to attend. We would also find it helpful if a representative who who conducted the search attended the meeting to provide, further information as to the type and extent of search conducted.
So for that, if the complaint is still live at the October meeting, we would like someone from BFI to be here in addition to Mr. Bond. Mm-hmm. And I think we should send this to various people over there so that they get the idea. And if they have any questions or need any clarification, they should contact Victor and we'll sort it out.
And definitely the fire chief should be.
The chief, the fire sorry, Mr. Bond, the fire marshal, does that then roll up to the deputy of operations?
You can include him too.
Okay, I mean, if we need to name everybody at 2nd Street, we'll do it. I mean, we want to get their attention on this. Maybe it's naive, but we'll try. So I think that's my amended and restated motion.
The instructions would be for me to draft that letter and submit it to the chair for final approval.
That sounds good.
I second the
Of course, I will
motion.
send it to both members for review also.
Okay.
And
Thank
I think we've communicated this. We've discussed the substance.
And after much discussion on that item, public item on the motion, or public comment on the motion before us?
Members of Compliance and Amendments, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government, and I have to share Mr. Piccirillo's concerns. I think at this point, after 2 years, it's kind of naive to think that a meeting is going to produce something. I have a hard time really believing that any organization is so badly set up that they haven't had discussions about this complaint among different people. I mean, either that or they're just being willfully obtuse. I don't know about you, but every place I have ever worked, if I have one of my subordinates spending hours and hours and hours working on a very simple request, I would be concerned about that. And I would be concerned not just for the fact that we're not complying with the law, but the fact that our people are wasting their time. And if this gentleman is sending out emails to people and they're just not simply choosing to respond, that's wasting his time. And it's making the department look bad. Now, I taught insurance for AIG in Hawaii for 3 years. And I've got licenses in commercial and all sorts of different insurances. And insurance companies are not going to pay off on a claim unless they have every damn document that's available. And I have a really hard time understanding why an insurance company who they've obviously been communicating with has apparently gotten documents that Mr. Piccirillo can't get. It really puts a person, especially someone who is subject or a victim of a fire, in this wholly untenable position of the insurance company perhaps saying, well, we're not going to pay you for your loss because according to the records we have, it was arson. And you have nothing to refute that with. You say, well, what records are you talking about? And of course, the insurance company has no obligation to give you a copy of those records, so you're caught between the rock and the hard place. But again, what Mr. Piccirillo said is true. It seems to be that you are bending over backwards and using the rationale that we want to get Mr. Piccirillo the documents and ignoring on the other side the fact that they've had 2 full years to produce the documents and made no action from what I can see in the file until a few days ago. And now they come in and they list a whole list of documents that they supposedly sent to them. Very frankly, if I was going to come here and say to you, we sent these documents to Mr. Piccirillo, I would have the email addressed to Mr. Piccirillo saying, Mr. Piccirillo, on this date, here are copies of all the things, and it would show all the attachments at the top. But that hasn't been produced. So the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think this is going to go back to the full task force, and you're not going to be any further along there than you have been the last 2 times here.
Just so we're clear for the record, the operative public records request was January 21st of this year. So it's not actually 2 years. The fire was almost 2 years ago. But the records request has been pending for almost 7 months.
Okay.
Doesn't make it any more excusable. It's just, yeah.
There being no further public comment on the matter, on the motion, Member Pilpil?
Aye.
Pilpil, aye. Member Washburn?
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner?
Aye.
Hepner, aye. This matter will be referred back to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force meeting of October 7th, and a letter will be drafted and sent out to the listed the mentioned people.
And we'll add some more as we draft it. Okay.
Yes. Next on the agenda,
Thank you both.
Thank you.
file number 15038, hearing on the status of the order of determination complaint filed by Ray Hartz against President London Breed, Board of Supervisors, for violating Administrative Code Section 67.25A and 67.21E, for failure to respond to immediate disclosure requests in a timely and or complete manner, and failure to send a knowledgeable representative to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force hearing.
Thank you, Victor. And just a recap on this item as I pull up my notes.
We have someone here from Breeds?
We do. This was a request by Mr. Hartz, the complainant, for any and all documents that each of you, which Supervisor Breed in this context, and President Breed's staff reviewed in the calendar years 2012, 13, 14, and 15 in the process of deciding on whether or not to approve the Friends of the Public Library annual quote-unquote gifts to the San Francisco Public Library. This came before us, I believe, on June 3rd. Is that correct? This item, as well as with a similar complaint against Mark Farrell's, Supervisor Farrell's office, there was no response to the request, and there was no representative from the respondent's office, no knowledgeable representative sent before the task force to sort of elucidate what search had taken place, whether any response had been provided. So we were sort of left with few options, but to find a violation for failure to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a timely and or complete manner, and also a violation of Section 67.21, subsection E, for failure to send a knowledgeable representative to the task force hearing. And that's what's before us today. And I don't know, have we received any further response from Supervisor Breed's office?
May we call up the representative?
Yes, I do want to call up the representative from Supervisor Breed's office. However, I was first trying to update our body here on whether any additional information had been provided.
I don't think we got anything in August. There was something in June, a very short missive.
Okay, well, why don't we bring up the complainant, Mr. Hartz, and if you could just briefly tell me if any information has been provided to you since the issuing of our order of determination on June 3rd?
As I stated in the record, I can't exactly tell you where it is. There has been nothing, not a single document produced, and there has not even been a response saying we have nothing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartz. That answers my question. And then I see a representative from Supervisor Breed's office present. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Connor Johnston, Legislative Aide to Board President London Breed. Let me just get this out of the way. Just to review the facts of the case, Mr. Hartz submitted or sent an immediate disclosure request on March 19th of this year. On March 24th, he filed a complaint alleging non-response. On May 29th at 3:05 p.m., that complaint was sent out as an agenda item for the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. 24 minutes later, at 3:29 p.m., I responded with, and I will quote, could you please let the task force know that I have never seen that IDR email until now. Perhaps it ended up in a junk folder. Either way, we have no responsive documents. Mr. Hartz was copied on that email subsequent to that, so his assertion that he never received a response from our office is inaccurate. He did receive a response indicating that we have no responsive documents. This body held a hearing on June 3rd and has now accused our office of failure to send a knowledgeable representative to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force hearing.
Before we move on to that one, I am looking at the email from the May 29th email, 3:29 p.m. from you, Connor Johnston, to Victoria Wong, Wilson Ng. It does not appear that that was sent to Mr. Hartz, and perhaps that is the cause of some confusion there. I don't see him in the CC line.
In the packet, if you look at the email dated Tuesday, June 30th, which is from Mr. Hartz, I believe the string of emails are included in that. Because my email would have been included in that packet. If that's not the case, then I stand corrected. But that is the way it appears in the packet.
In our agenda packet.
Yeah,
Do you have a page number on the bottom of that?
Page 175. No, that was a standalone item. That was in response to the order.
The June 30th email?
Correct. And I would think, though I can't verify it with the hard copies I have in front of me, that my email would have been included in the agenda packet that's copied below on June 29th.
So,
No, that was the follow-up that then got us here.
right. We heard this item on June 3rd.
Okay.
And sent out.
So it was yeah. So even if it was included in a packet that was included with our order of determination that may have been sent to the respondent, I don't think that information was before us on June 3rd. Nor do I believe that Mr. Hartz had received that response ever.
He was never directly communicated with by Connor.
Right. So it appears there was no direct communication of that from your office to Mr. Hartz.
The communication was via the clerk's office, as is often our protocol for these.
Through the clerk's through Victor's?
Correct.
So
I believe he means he is referring to maybe Mr. Wilson Ng,
okay.
records manager for the clerk of the board.
Well, now former.
Former.
Now former, yes.
And do we have any knowledge of whether that communication to Mr. Ng was communicated to Mr. Hartz? I mean, it's simplest, just generally speaking, to communicate directly with the complainant, the requester of the documents in these circumstances. I imagine your office is a constituent-serving office that has the capacity to do that and is used to doing that, and communicating with Mr. Hartz directly on his records request may have obviated this entire thing. I mean, at the hearing, there was a similar complaint against another supervisor's office that was withdrawn, apparently because Mr. Hartz had received communication that no such records existed. So if that was the response that needed to be relayed to Mr. Hartz, then maybe that's just the source of the miscommunication, is that it was not relayed to Mr. Hartz.
That could be, and I can't speak to that, but typically if we provide information to Wilson or to Victor and ask that to be relayed to the complainant or the requester, that is done. If that wasn't done in this case, I can't speak to it.
Well, from what I've heard, I think that I can somewhat safely say that it was not done. But let's okay. So setting aside the issue of whether Mr. Hartz received that communication, you're communicating it now. It's reflected in our packet to some, that email was that communication took place, that records do not exist, right? And that this went to a junk folder. So we can address that issue separately. The other issue is the non-appearance at the meeting of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force on June 3rd, and I think you were beginning to explain some of that.
Correct. So, as corroborated by the City Attorney's Office, this body under Section 67.21E of the Administrative Code has the authority to conduct a public hearing concerning a records request denial. And I'm quoting now, an authorized representative of the custodian of public records requested shall attend any hearing and explain the basis for its decision to withhold the records requested. In this instance, there were no records, thus there were no records withheld, thus there is no legal obligation for our office to send a knowledgeable representative.
So, interesting.
Follow up on that?
Member Philpott, please.
Okay, so Mr. Johnston, and I don't think we've really interacted, I know of you, and you probably know of me, but I don't think we've really spent time together. So it's good that we're doing that finally. So that's sort of and we discussed this earlier, I don't know if you were in the room at the time, that's kind of a narrow read of the ordinance. So with that kind of approach, a department that, for whatever reason, doesn't respond to a records request, if a complaint is made that they never responded, they could argue that, not only did they not respond, but they also didn't deny any records, so they have no reason to appear to explain their non-response. So although it is a narrow read, I'm not sure that it's a sort of reasonable read. And I don't want to make a bigger deal out of this. I mean, I think you're here now, and we very much appreciate that. I think at the end of this, just telling Mr. Hartz that you didn't have any responsive documents would have taken care of the thing. And I don't know that require, compel, those are strong words. I think urge and sort of expect departments to show up when there's a complaint lodged against them to explain what happened. And, if it's a reasonable explanation, we'll take it. And if we need to ask questions, we ask questions. That's kind of how our sort of little program here works. Is there, if I may, is there on your website any information about how people can seek public records from your office? Is there a best email to use if they're sending it by email? Is it to the supervisor? Is it to all three of the aides? Is it to something like Breed staff? What's the best way for things not to end up in a junk folder?
I believe on our website it lists the issue areas that each of our three staffers are involved in. So I don't know if it explicitly says with respect to immediate disclosure requests or sunshine requests, but it certainly encourages people to contact staff members.
Is there, so what is your general request and I don't have email, so you're not getting anything from me. If someone has an email request of a records request of your office, who should they send it to?
It's always best to cast a wide net, and that would include the supervisor's email address and all three of the staffers.
Okay. Is there something on your website that says if you're looking for records from our office, here's how to do it?
I don't know.
Okay. I would encourage you, if you can, to just put a small thing somewhere appropriate that might help people, because we've had complaints like this before where people are making a request of a supervisor and it goes to the wrong aide and they say, well, I didn't check that box. And yeah, I'm not telling you who to set up and how to handle this, but if whatever your preference is, just so that things get responded to on a timely basis. So we don't have to hear it, you don't have to be here, we can just get the guy the stuff and move on. Thank you.
I believe we are sending a letter to members of the Board of Supervisors with some advice about how to help requesters.
We were going to send a memo to all members of the Board of Supervisors regarding an automatic reply, inserting into the automatic reply a suggestion to also send it to certain legislative aides if it needs immediate attention.
Right.
And you're about ready to sign off on that, right?
It has been signed off.
Right, it has been signed off. So, Mr. Johnston, we've had this similar matters come up with other supervisors over the past few years, and one of the things that our task force is charged with is working with staff so that procedures are put into place so that things don't fall through the cracks. And certainly having information on the website that helps requesters, it helps the requester and it helps your office. So, our original hearing, it would have been very helpful if somebody had come to talk to us then, because an IDR was lost and a violation occurred. And so part of what we do is help, like I said, help staff figure out how to prevent this from happening. And we were frustrated because we had no one to talk to at the meeting. Mr. Hartz has...
Yeah, and this actually was incredibly clear. And very large print. So,
Right.
Yes.
What page is that in our packet?
188 in our packet.
Yeah, this is,
And and I'll note also that this was not sent to. Well, this is sent to Supervisor Breed's apparent Board of Supervisors. I guess that's her SF.gov email address, but it does not appear that it was sent to any.
AIDS.
Oh well, no, it was not. This was the communication for Victor Young.
Yeah.
But it was not sent to any aides. I do think it's a good idea to have on the website a contact, a special, for records requests, please email. Maybe set up a separate email address. I mean, you'll get that communication from us as to the best practices there. But, at a minimum, communicating that information to Mr. Hartz could have, obviated this entire hearing, this entire process.
Well, that was my intent on May 29th, in advance of the hearing.
Right, but that was not communicated to Mr. Hartz.
And that's for reasons that I can't speak to in the clerk's office.
Well, right. I don't want to. I don't want to put it on there. I don't want to make this any more complicated than it needs to be. But the easiest way to avoid that problem going forward is to send that information directly to the requester of records. Had that been done, we probably would not be here. I'm not certain of that. We may still have had an unsatisfied response from Mr. Hartz. We saw that at the hearing that he had received that response from Supervisor Campos's office and decided to drop his complaint against Supervisor Campos's office. That may have happened in this circumstance. There's no reason for this to be a adversarial relationship between the task force and Supervisor Breed's office. This is a means for improving access to records and streamlining these mechanisms so that we don't have to come before this body over and over and over again.
And I think on that front, you would find a tremendous amount of agreement with us. I would suggest that the most efficient mechanism of doing that would be to work department-wide via the clerk's office. That would be the best way to make sure this is implemented across all 11 offices.
And by that, you mean when we send out, what do you...
Well, if you're suggesting a policy with respect to what's listed on supervisors' websites, it would be best if we send that to all 11 and coordinate with the clerk's office as the overseer of our websites to suggest the best course of action.
And I would assume that's the way it's being done.
I wouldn't bank on that.
I would suggest that each supervisor has their own policy on how to handle public records requests. The clerk of the board does not currently get involved in that matter. As far as I understand, the clerk of the board or her staff does not get involved with supervisors' response to immediate disclosure requests.
Normally. Yeah, I mean, to Mr. Johnston, I guess from my perspective, one of the complications is that the Board of Supervisors operates, as we're discussing, a little differently than all other city departments. So each of the 11 electeds are semi-independent, and the clerk sort of runs, the systems for everybody. So you may have one approach to a thing, and Supervisor Farrell or Supervisor Tang may have a different approach. And so I think our memo that's on the way may help, but I'm not sure that we're ever going to get to the point of entirely consistent approaches to things. We're trying to get better. But I hear what you're saying about trying to encourage everyone to operate similarly. And I don't disagree with that either.
I think we're essentially saying the same things. You're intending to send this to all 11 offices, which I guess I'm just suggesting that doing that would be the most efficient approach. Yeah. And so
we're doing it.
The same thing.
The wheels are in motion. Could we hear again from Mr. Hartz if there's anything else?
He wanted to speak to us.
Yeah, I think so. So,
or what else we need to do?
With all due respect to the representative from the supervisor's office, I think it's rather disingenuous that I went before the Board of Supervisors on 3 separate occasions and explicitly put, and Supervisor Breed was the presiding officer, and I put Microsoft PowerPoint slides up on the thing and said, here's a request I sent on this date, and it has not been replied to. And I did that on 3 separate occasions. When I sent the email, the original request, I called their office, and I told the person who answered the phone, would you please let them know that an immediate disclosure request was just sent by me within the last half hour. I mean, it really is kind of, and when the complaint was filed, they didn't respond to the complaint. So it's basically like, what do I have to do? I mean, do I have to go in and do a rain dance, so they can call the sheriff and say, Mr. Hartz isn't welcome here because he's causing an issue? I mean, how many different ways does somebody have to make a request before that finally, and this continuous, it must have been put in the spam folder. Anywhere that I have ever worked, if you tried to tell your boss that something fell through the cracks because it went in a spam folder, they would say, well, why is that happening? That's not good. And if mine is going in, what is to say that others are not? It almost seems like if eventually, after 7 months, they finally say, we don't have any records, then they're off the hook. And the fact is there are records. The clerk of the board has records on her website which relate to the very matter that was in the request. So if nothing else, they could have referred me to the clerk of the board's website and said, there are the documents. It's the same thing with Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Farrell says, we didn't review any documents in deciding on this, but the documents were all attached to the agenda that he, as chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, set up. So it's like, they give you an answer, and they actually expect you, they expect that you're some sort of a moron, where I would say, oh, there's absolutely no record. And we voted on this, and we approved this millions of dollars worth of budget, of gift, but nobody. And that's what we're really coming down to. Nobody, not the city librarian, not the library commission, not the supervisors, nobody looked at a single document when approving this. We didn't look at the request. We didn't look at anything. Now, oddly enough, Supervisor Christensen, not being new to the game, when I sent her the request, she sent me 8 documents, including a letter from the Friends to the Library talking about a gift, and the enabling documentation, which had to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So to say that there are no responsive documents, basically, as you can see, this went to all the supervisors. I can say that never do they ever look at anything when approving this. And the Budget and Finance Committee was especially egregious because Peter Warfield and I both went there and raised issues. And what they did is they ignored what we said and then came back and said, well, none of our staff ever looked at anything.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hartz. And, to the extent that I think that our jurisdiction to solve the bigger problem here for you, Mr. Hartz, has probably come to the end of its road, but you have information and statements from various offices that will aid you in pursuit of that end. And then...
But what I don't understand is that it took 7 months, they still haven't responded, and you're saying, okay.
Well, Mr. Hartz, I think that they have effectively responded by now. And that,
I have gotten nothing.
And that response from...
So you're saying they can send an email to anybody, and if they produce that email, then that satisfies their requirements.
Mr. Hartz, and in fact, the reason that we're here today talking to the respondent, talking to the representative from Supervisor Breed's office, is to tighten some of these mechanisms so that communication can reach you directly the first time.
Doesn't help me at all. I mean, it's all well and good you want to take care of the general welfare, but what about my particular case? You basically have someone who, this whole agenda was nothing but Supervisor Breed. Their office seems to have a total contempt, not only for the Sunshine Ordinance, but the California Public Records Act, and for you as well as me.
So, Mr. Hartz, can I just ask you a quick question? If we ask Supervisor Breed's office to just send you a one-line email saying, in response to such and such request from you, we have no responsive records, would that improve things for you?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Why did it take me getting this way?
I don't know, Mr. Hartz.
Simple
You answered
They
my
could have
question.
done that any time
You
in the
answered-
last 7 months.
Thank you. You answered my question. So,
Um,
I guess I would personally ask the supervisor's representative if you could just issue a one-line response to Mr. Hartz, if you could arrange to do that at some point so that he has a formal response to his records request. That would be nice. And other than that, what are our options? I mean, are we prepared to put this to bed?
I mean, I'm prepared to find compliance. I have concerns going forward. I don't know that, I trust that the letter to the 11 supervisors will address the best practices aspect of this regarding, who fields sunshine requests and how they're responded to and what the website looks like to facilitate that happening in a functional manner. And then the other aspect of this going forward that I'm concerned about is the narrow interpretation of who can be compelled to appear before the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and I would only urge Mr. Johnston to not adopt that position, not to adopt that view of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, of the Sunshine Ordinance. I think it's, as Member Pilpel also stated, not reasonable to adopt that interpretation. And it's not really helpful. I think that we wouldn't be here today had we put this to bed really easily on June 3rd.
Or sooner.
What is that?
Or sooner.
Or sooner.
Yeah.
And that goes for all of these things. Again, this is not a bully bullpen. This is an opportunity to facilitate more transparent and open government processes. That's our charge here.
Did Mr. Johnston have something to respond?
I was only going to say two things. One, that I would be happy to send the email as you requested. I will do that when I leave this hearing. And secondly, in the future, I think Mr. Hartz would probably be much more likely to have his immediate disclosure requests seen if he sends them to all of our staff in addition to just the supervisor.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do I have a motion to find compliance with the order of determination?
Member Washburn, did you have something to add? Chair Washburn?
I
Excuse me.
so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any public comment on the matter? I do not see any public comment at this time. On that motion, Member Pilpel.
Aye.
Pilpel, aye. Member Washburn.
Aye.
Washburn, aye. Chair Hepner.
Aye.
Hepner, aye. The motion passes.
And the matter is concluded.
Concluded. The next three items, I believe I mentioned that Mr. Petrellis is ill and has requested a postponement of the following items, number 5, 6, and 7.
And our procedure with such requests is that if it's the first time that request is being made and if it's made timely, we tend to grant that request. I see no reason not to grant it here, except that I was looking forward to addressing these items while we do have a representative from the supervisor's office present. But do my colleagues have any other thoughts on continuing items 5, 6, and 7?
No, I too was looking forward to addressing these items too, and I hope that Supervisor Breed's office will continue to come to our hearings. They are for fact-finding. It's an opportunity for us to learn the merits of a complaint and to troubleshoot problems where there are problems. So when these appear on the agenda, again, I look forward to seeing a representative from her office here.
Agreed.
Is there a motion to continue the matter to the call of the chair?
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second, but I have some comments.
Would you like to share those comments now, or?
Yeah, one moment. if this committee is still only meeting every other month, and this likely wouldn't get heard for another 2 months, I think we should find some way to either have a special meeting or I'm not sure how long Mr. Petralis is under the weather, but I think these things are important, and I wanted to be able to discuss the violations that were found. And sorry, is Mr. Johnson still out there?
He is.
Okay. I'm not seeing you behind the thing. And where we go forward, and I was particularly concerned about an email that I think I saw in here saying that the board's on recess and we'll get back to you in September. Was that in this packet?
I don't recall.
I think I saw that. Anyway, I was just particularly concerned about that and wanted to express my view that although the board may be in recess, that the offices still have some obligation to respond, perhaps not as timely, but not certainly delayed till September. So I was concerned about that.
Well, I think, we'll just have to postpone discussion on some of those substantively interesting items until next meeting. I don't know, do we, in terms of scheduling a special meeting to have these heard sooner than later?
I would probably want to wait to hear from Mr. Petralis.
Right.
It was not a simple illness from my conversation. It was not something that was going to clear up soon.
He was in the hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
So can we maybe make it a point that when he's available, we will attempt to schedule it as soon as possible, and if he continues to be unavailable, that we would perhaps hear them in his absence? I mean, I think, particularly the things where there was already a violation found, I think we need to find a path, as they like to say now, the kids, a path forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be aided by him being here, but I'm not sure that it is actually required.
So what are you?
Well, I mean, I think some of these were about their policies and procedures, and although I'm certainly not suggesting it needed to be referred to EOT, but there are questions about compliance. And again, without getting into the substance right now, I just think that we would be able to address them
At EOT?
No, here, wherever.
Right.
But, perhaps with or without Mr. Petralis is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying it eloquently, and I apologize.
And also, item number 7 could be heard and it wouldn't have to be heard by us. This is a new complaint.
I placed it on the agenda for convenience purposes, as both parties were going to be here anyways.
Right. No, I understand that, but it could be heard sooner rather than later.
Right. So maybe with the motion to continue, it would be understood that if 7 can get rerouted elsewhere and
Right.
heard sooner,
That need
that's
not be,
fine.
right. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, and what we do with that motion is we can decide. But why don't we take public comment on that motion?
Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Obviously, with Mr. Petralis ill and seriously ill, from my understanding, I think continuing it is the fair thing to do. Obviously, when the city representatives don't show up, it's sort of a pro forma, let's schedule it for later on so that the complainant isn't disadvantaged.
One moment. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt what your
No,
conversation
Mr. Hartz, I'm listening.
Okay. As you know, I have 24 orders of determination. That's 24 times I've come before the task force and gotten a finding that the city agencies involved in those particular cases had violated the ordinance. That doesn't even include all the ones that I've filed, which I subsequently withdrew or whatever. The real issue with these complaints is the fact that most citizens of this city don't have any idea how to deal with this, and most of them going through it once would never come back again. The burden is on the complainant at all points. The city can come in and send a representative who will simply make claims, which they will then, if pushed, which often they're not, but when they are pushed, say, I really don't know, I can't respond. So basically, we get in these situations where these things drag on and on and on for months. And I think sometimes you guys seem to forget that you, in the law, have a requirement to have these hearings within 45 days. And yet it's 7, 8, 9 months. With my complaint regarding the city librarian, that had dragged on for 2 full years, and dragged in the city attorney's office and the city attorney's supervisor of records and the controller's office. Mr. Petrellis was ill. And I think, to be fair, anytime somebody does say, I need a continuance and I'm ill, it should be granted. I certainly think so in light of the fact that when the city employees just decide not to show up, and that's what happened in my case, they simply decided not to come. It wasn't that they weren't notified. It wasn't, we can see through the email strings. They get the notification and they make a conscious decision not to go. And I think it's like the representative from the fire department. He can't answer the questions, and that's why they send him. Because they have embarrassing questions, you have embarrassing questions, and they don't have answers, or the answers they have make them look even worse than they already do. So they just send somebody who can say, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. And seeing no other public comment at this time, I think we should probably, yes, Member Pilpel?
So is Mr. Johnston still out there? Yeah, okay. So you got my comment about the board recess. That's actually in reference to page 198 of the packet. There was an email exchange between Mr. Petrellis and I guess Ms. Wong of your staff?
That's correct.
And
she's here as well.
Okay. So you understand my view of the matter, and I would encourage you to sort of reconsider where you are on that.
Noted.
Okay, thanks.
So we'll take a...
On that motion to continue the matters to the call of the chair, Member Pilpel.
Or could we do this without objection?
Yeah, I suppose, but sure.
I mean, unless there's objection, right?
No.
The motion is passed without objection, there being no objection.
And
Next on the agenda
that's
is
items
item
5 through 7. And 7 may get rerouted.
Right, with the understanding that item 7 may be in a different forum.
Item number 8, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Is there any general public comment?
A little bit of San Francisco history here. At the Cow Palace in 1964, Barry Goldwater accepted the Republican nomination for president, and he said, he made a quote basically saying that, in defense of liberty, being subtle or whatever is really not a virtue. And basically, I've had comments made to me about maybe, Mr. Hartz, if you were more polite or more politic or more this or more that, they would give you what you asked for. And the answer to that is no. I've been doing this for 7 or 8 years now. And no amount of honey is going to get them to do something if they decide they don't want to do it. And having to come here and repeatedly, I mean, how many times would somebody ignore your legal requests and actually be determined by a city body to have done so? How long would you then say, oh, well, I'll just count on the fact that they're going to go in the future and comply? What's the old expression? Fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. And that's what happens in these things. Nothing. The only thing these orders are good for is to go before the body and shame them. I think Supervisor London Breed should be ashamed of herself. She's the president of the Board of Supervisors, and here there is a whole agenda with nothing but complaints about her and not responding to public records requests. They know what the obligation of the law is. They knew when they got it, they had an obligation. And the fact that they're not organized enough to not lose these things is not an excuse. It's sort of an indictment of their own performance. Anywhere I've ever worked, if my boss got called into the carpet and then said to me, "Why didn't you, Ray Hartz, respond to this thing?" and I said, "Oh, it was in the junk mail folder," I might get away with that one time. But the second time, my boss would be going, "You're fired. Or else we're going to put you in a position where you can handle it, because obviously you can't." And the idea that a citizen of this city has to somehow figure out that they need to spend, and I did this with Supervisor Farrell. I sent a copy of my last 2 requests, not only to him, but to every one of his aides, and he still didn't respond. And we can sit down and we can parse these things and decide how many angels are on the head of a pin, but the bottom line is they are arrogant in the way they deal with the Sunshine Ordinance. And the simple fact is most of these cases also are indicative of a violation of the California Public Records Act. And as long as you take the tack you have taken over the last few years, they are going to just ignore you, because they know there is absolutely nothing you can or will do.
Thank you, Mr. Hartz. And is there any other public comment? Seeing none. Agenda item 9, I suppose.
Item number 9, approval of minutes from the Compliance Amendments Committee, April 21st, 2015 meeting. I have received clerical amendments from both Member Washburn and Member Pelpel.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second?
If we could take that without objection. Well, is there any public comment on that? Seeing none.
There is no public comment. Item number 10 is a listing of our pending calendar. If you have no comments, we can, and there are no members of the public in the room at this time.
Just 1 second on that. I like that we're listing the things that are in committee. That's helpful. I actually like even more when we have a little summary in parens, like the 4th item for non-attendance. Maybe if we could, for each of these items, either list what the violations were or just some context for the thing, and if there's a reason that things are being held, like the first item, pending update, just so that we know, because I think we're hopefully all looking carefully at our workload and backlog and trying to clear things out. So the fewer things we have sitting in the queue, the better, and then the more time we have to be proactive with things like best practices and amendments and whatnot. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah,
sounds good.
absolutely. Thank you.
yeah. But I appreciate, Victor, that we're doing this thing.
There being no further comments on that item, item number 11, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items.
I don't have anything falling under any of those categories in particular, but if anybody else does.
I just think that the memo that we talked about at the last full task force meeting regarding the amendment on calendars,
Right.
we probably don't need to do now, because the city attorney put out a memo that I think was circulated to everyone,
Right.
and basically said actually more than we were probably going to say. So that was actually very helpful.
Great.
With the approval of Chair Washburn, I will remove that from the next SOTF meeting.
Thank you.
Are we getting anywhere with the annual report and things?
I have not received any
Anything from
anything. I have not received any documentation regarding that at this time.
All right, I'm way
But it
behind
is
in
scheduled
things
for our
and-
next agenda.
Yeah, I asked Victor to add that, and I'm hoping to get to my part of it. I've been busy with work.
And I still have lots of things to do, so it's not like I'm looking for more.
So the best, I think I shared with everybody at the full task force meeting, and Chair Hepner, the easiest thing to do is to edit the previous years.
Right.
So, and
That makes sense. I mean, it's already format
Right.
specific. It's, we can That's almost like drop, fill in the blanks.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
And then go through when I did the CAC reports, I would go through the minutes and just, it's probably way more information than we need, but it is a document that kind of captures our history. So if nobody else reads it, at least it's an archive and an easy,
Right.
all in one place.
Yeah, I mean,
So it serves that purpose.
yeah, regardless of the audience, I think if someone, we should be so lucky that 20 years from now, someone's looking back and trying to figure out, what did the task force do and what did we accomplish and what were our challenges and
Somebody will write a book about us.
yeah, and how well did we prosper under Chair Washburn's tenure? I'm telling you.
Okay.
There's going to be a plaque, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any other announcements? Next on the agenda is adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Without
So moved.
objection.